In the early 1990s, Metallica decided to start a lawsuit that turned out to be a key moment in the band's career. The band filed a legal claim against their own label, demanding to change the terms of their contract. This partly explains why there was such a long gap between the Black Album and the next record, Load, and why the band cut back their touring activity in 1994. If Metallica had lost the lawsuit, who knows? Maybe the band would have ended up stuck in the past. But, in my subjective opinion, Lars Ulrich was not only an unrecognized genius of marketing, but also a genius of management. He managed to pull off a real blitzkrieg, and, within 2 months, forced the label to accept new terms. Terms that, by 2012, would give the band's business career a new direction. Metallica came out as winners. It is interesting that Lars Ulrich had to use loopholes in U.S. law, laws that were not native to him as he grew up in Denmark. However, he learned this legal system and, with the help of an army of lawyers, led Metallica into a brighter future with an iron hand. Today, we will talk about the lawsuit that Metallica filed in 1994 against their label Elektra and its parent company, Warner. When the band first went to court, a well-known California attorney, Don Engel, gave a comment to the LA Times, which dedicated an article to this significant lawsuit. He said that, if the multi-platinum Metallica won, the band would break the entire system, and their victory would be a major blow to all the labels. Dozens or even hundreds of artists would file similar claims. So, what exactly happened? In the 10th year of their contract with Elektra, Metallica demanded to terminate the agreement based on California's 7-year statute. In 1984, Metallica, who were just 21 or 22 years old, signed a contract with Elektra and headed straight for success. 4 albums, 1 EP, countless singles. Each release became another step up. By 1994, the band had sold a total of 40 million records. In their hands was a fresh commercial monster, the Black Album, which, even now, more than 3 decades later, still shows up in sales reports. And back then, it absolutely dominated the charts. On top of that, they had the Platinum, Heavy, and Dark, and Justice for All, plus the fast, intense albums Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. All of them were steadily reaching their deserved commercial success. It was clear the band had gained an unprecedented momentum for a metal act and moved into a new orbit, becoming a major revenue stream for the label's budget. And in that budget, while the band was not exactly getting crumbs, they still did not earn nearly as much as they wanted. Here's the number. Metallica received only 14% of royalties. In other words, from every dollar of songwriting income, the band received just 14 cents. And this was purely the money belonging to To understand this, let us say you bought a record for $10. About $150 would go to delivery, storage, and logistics. $5 was the cost of manufacturing the disc and cover. Another $150 would be taken by lawyers and accountants. Another dollar would go to the band's management for overseeing the process. Again, these are just approximate numbers. That left $1 for the authors. And even that dollar was not paid in full. Elektra would keep 86 cents and give Metallica just 14 cents. Of course, it was understandable. For the label, this was compensation for the investments they made in the band in the early years. Nobody was canceling the risks. Tours, accidents, alcohol, broken arms, all of that happened and threatened the band's career. The label took a risk and won. Bingo. But after 10 years, Metallica was no longer satisfied with that logic. The band had become a phenomenon that could sell out stadiums, and the label's contribution was now much less than it had been at the start. The Black Album had exploded so massively that continuing under the same conditions was not acceptable to them anymore. The formal reason for the lawsuit was the change in Elektra's top management. Bob Krasnow left the company, and Robert Morgado took over. Lars Ulrich skillfully used this moment to file the lawsuit, demanding to revise Metallica's contract. First, he told the new management that there had been an oral agreement with Krasnow to renegotiate Metallica's deal after 10 years. But to Morgado, this meant nothing. He was the new CEO and did not care about his predecessor's promises. As a result, Lars included this in the legal claim. Here is the quote. Morgado's greed and arrogance canceled Krasnow's promises. Our trust in the company was washed away with the push of a button. Elektra had always been a label known for respectful treatment of musicians, but now it was just another office where arrogant businessmen break their promises. End of quote. It sounds powerful, but oral promises do not hold up in court. And here, Ulrich and Metallica did what no band had done before. They filed a lawsuit demanding to break the contract based on California's law limiting any personal services agreements to 7 years. What is this law? It says any personal contracts for services, performances, and so on cannot be enforced for more than 7 calendar years from the start date. This principle applied to everyone, including actors. The law itself goes back to actress Olivia de Havilland, star of Gone with the Wind. In 1944, she sued Warner Brothers, claiming her contract was illegally extended for years beyond the 7 stated on paper. Warner took an absurd position. They argued that 7 years meant 7 years' worth of actual work days. So if she worked 20 days a year, that only counted as 20 days. You could stretch 7 years into 7 lifetimes. Actors used this rule widely, but only actors. In the 1980s, record labels found a way around it. They signed bands not for a number of years, but for a specific number of albums. If a band tried to leave after 7 years, they would have to pay compensation for the albums they had not delivered. That is why in the 1990s, many groups released random compilations, live albums, and other strange records of questionable quality. You can probably think of plenty of examples in your favorite band's catalogs. But in 1994, Metallica decided to break this practice. It did not matter how many albums the contract covered, 7 years were 7 years. And Metallica already had 10 behind them, so who owed who? If actors use the 7-year rule, why should musicians be any different? On September 28, 1994, the official lawsuit was filed. Lars Ulrich, on behalf of Metallica, officially accused Warner Music's new management, led by Morgado, of being unreliable and canceling previously agreed terms, including the promise to increase royalties. The band demanded the return of all master tapes for their albums, which in effect would have freed them completely. And there were plenty of companies eager to buy licenses for Metallica's platinum records. At first, Elektra filed a countersuit accusing the band of breaching their contract, arguing it was still valid and binding. Then, as often happens, the sides sat down at the table. The first shots were fired, the opening moves were made, and it was time for closed-door negotiations. Remember, 1994 was not exactly a stagnant year for Metallica, but it was not their most active either. Yes, there was a summer tour in the US and big festivals, but in general, the band was catching their breath after the Black Album's huge success. They were getting married and divorced, recovering their health, and thinking about creative and business strategies for the future. Clearly, in their business calendar, this carefully planned legal attack against Elektra was a priority. They were ready for this war, what could have become a multi-year legal battle, something common in American commercial disputes, turned into Lars Ulrich's blitzkrieg. 2.5 months after filing, in December 1994, Metallica walked away from negotiations as the winners. Elektra's lawyers realized what danger they were in, facing a legal team that Metallica, now wealthy, could pay indefinitely. The band could afford a full-scale legal war, unlike smaller acts. They were ready for it mentally, too. The new Elektra leadership was not friendly with the musicians, unlike their predecessors who did not rush to help the new bosses. Plus, there was the 7-year law itself. In a prolonged war, if the court even partly sided with Metallica, it would create a precedent, and an endless line of musicians would go to court. In the end, the dispute was settled behind closed doors. In December 1994, Metallica withdrew the lawsuit. The full text of the settlement and the new contract was never disclosed. It was signed under a confidentiality agreement. But here is what we do know. Metallica continued working with Elektra. Royalties were significantly increased in the band's favor, though the exact figures remain unknown. Elektra's rights to Metallica's catalog were limited in time and completely expired in 2012. This case became an important precedent. Artists started to realize they had a legal way to get out of old contracts and fight for their masters. After Metallica, others used the same law. Courtney Love in 1999, 30 Seconds to Mars in 2009, Kesha, Don Henley, and many more. Of course, labels tried to resist and later amended the law. Today, it still exists, but with changes. Now there are limitations about advances, fees, and other details. As for Metallica, in November 2012, Elektra officially closed all issues related to the 1994 lawsuit and returned the master tapes to the band. Metallica founded their own label, Blackened, where they control 100% of their business. The musicians became the complete owners of their work, perhaps the only band on the planet to do so. Metallica waged a bold campaign, and the result was full creative control and the ability to release their music independently. That is where I will end this story. It is the perfect moment to put on Master of Puppets and feel glad that, decades later, it still benefits its creators and not giant corporations. That is all for today. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on the channel.